In this video, I'll be listing the worst flaws of competitors who are qualified for the 2025 Open Mr. Olympia. Flaws can come in many different ways, from muscular imbalances or injuries to inconsistent condition or structural problems. I will try my best to explain them for each competitor and give an explanation on why they are considered problems in a bodybuilding sense. Also, please do not take this one all that seriously. I mean, you can take it as seriously as you want, but it's not really meant to be negative in any sort of way, just criticism and constructive criticism at that. Alright, starting off we have Regan Grimes. Now, he has one of the best structures in the entire division, I would say, with a wide frame, small waist, and very good lines. But the big issue for him is that his physique doesn't really match the frame in density or thickness. His chest, for example, often looks a bit shallow in the side chest pose, and that lack of roundness does hurt him when compared to guys who can really pop in that one. Overall, his muscle maturity doesn't really have that same dense look or separation that other top competitors might, and when he comes in a bit more conditioned, he can even look a bit flatter, I would say, which only highlights that issue. Areas like the inner arms even lack deeper cuts, so he loses some ground there, and the end result is that despite having the shape and proportions to do really well, Regan can look thinner than he actually is, and until he adds that extra size and density, especially in the chest and upper body as a whole, he will continue to fall short of his Olympia potential. Next up is William Bonac. Now, Bonac is known for his dense, compact muscle and great detail, but his biggest weakness has always been the midsection in my own opinion. His waist is a bit wide and blocky, and age has only made it a little bit worse. When he crunches into a side ab and thigh, though, he can make it look pretty presentable, I would say, but in most shots, the midsection does stand out as an eyesore against his otherwise very competitive physique. On top of that, his triceps have lost a lot of that size and shape in the front shots, which takes away from the arms as a whole, and one of his lats also has a visible tear that throws off the symmetry from behind. It all adds up to a physique that is still very competitive, as he has proven himself time and time again, but clearly showing signs of wear. He remains a very dangerous competitor with a lot of strong points, but these flaws are definitely obvious and keep him from looking as polished as he once did. Now we come to the reigning Mr. Olympia, Samson Dauda. Samson has one of the best structures in bodybuilding right now, with massive quads, a full chest, and flowing lines that make him look like a modern-day aesthetic champion. But in my opinion, his biggest flaw has consistently been condition. Time and time again, areas like the glutes and the hamstrings do not show the same razor-sharp detail that he might have in some frontal poses, and even his arms look a bit softer from the front compared to the razor-sharp quads and great chest that dominate his physique. This has been the deciding factor in, several close shows that he could have won in my own opinion, but didn't, simply because he did not bring that sharp finish. When he finally nailed it at the 2024 Olympia, though, in my opinion, he was undeniable, proving that if he gets the detail right, nobody can really touch him. But the big question moving forward is that consistency factor, because conditioning has always been the one thing holding him back. Next is Dorian Haywood. As the 2025 Masters Olympia champion, he has proven himself at a rather high level, but compared to the current Olympia lineup in the open division, he doesn't really have the physique to keep up. His biggest flaw has got to be the lack of overall mass, especially in the lower body, which makes him look undersized next to the biggest names in the division. On top of that, his structure and insertions do not give him a lot of standout shape or great aesthetics, so he doesn't have that visual wow factor that others do. Also, at over 40, age is, working against him, because this is typically past the prime years for peak development and recovery. When it comes to his age bracket, though, he looks amazing and has made the most of his physique, but on the Olympia stage, the lack of size, balance, and standout lines will definitely always limit how competitive he can be. Also, if you guys are enjoying the video so far, a like and sub would really be awesome, as it helps out the channel tremendously. Now let's talk about Brandon Curry. At over 40, he is one of the older competitors in the division, but as a former Mr. Olympia, his genetics and structure are still really great. For most of his career, the knock on Brandon was his leg development, but this year he surprised everyone by bringing them up to a much better standard. Even so, his hamstrings and glutes do remain weaker compared to most top competitors, and his biggest flaw now, though, has got to be consistency with peaking. If he comes in too conditioned, his legs can flatten out and lose a lot of that volume that we saw from him in 2025, and the imbalance in his arms can become even more noticeable, like we saw at the 2024 Olympia. On the other hand, if he tries to fill out, he does lose a bit of that detail, especially from behind, and that hurts him against much sharper competitors. At his best balance, like we saw from him in 2025, I would say, he is still one of the most aesthetically gifted guys right now, but whether or not he nails that balance is always in question. Moving on, we have Jordan Hutchinson. He's a very complete bodybuilder, and it is hard to find any major weaknesses, but there are still some areas that hold him back from cracking the very top. His biggest flaw would be his back, in my opinion, which does lack the depth and the thickness needed to go up against the best right now. His arms, while much improved, could also use a bit more size and shape to balance out his frame. Beyond that, his structure isn't really the most favorable, I would say. He doesn't really have the widest clavicles, and his waist, while not super blocky, isn't particularly pleasing in shape, which does hurt him aesthetically. Overall, Jordan has all the tools, in my own opinion, to be very competitive, especially because of that amazing condition he brings, and he has definitely made steady progress in terms of mass, but until he adds even more size in the key areas and sharpens up his presentation in terms of keeping that midsection in check all the time, he will struggle, in my own opinion, to push into the top spots at his first Mr. Olympia. Now we have Behrooz Tabani. His biggest flaw by far would be the quads. He has very little sweep, almost no separation between the heads, and it really hurts his front poses. This stands out even more because his upper body is extremely massive and incredibly dense, creating a clear imbalance that is very hard to overlook. Another issue, though it's not a physical one, would be the inability to compete in the United States because of political restrictions between Iran and America. That's arguably a bigger obstacle than any structural flaw, because without being on stage, he can't even really be judged fairly against the rest of the lineup. On top of that, his abs are not really great genetically, though that's a much smaller concern compared to the legs and, of course, the travel issue. If he ever does make it to the Olympia, though, I would definitely say the quad disparity will be the first thing everyone sees, and it is what limits how competitive he can really be at the highest level at the Mr. Olympia. Next is Rafael Brandao. He isn't stepping on the Olympia stage in 2025, unfortunately, but if he was, his biggest issue would be overall size. On his own, he looks incredible, a lot of balance, proportional, and, one of the best structures as well. But when you put him up against a guy like Samson Dauda, or the massive Nick Walker, or even the very complete, conditioned, and very refined Martin Fitzwater, he can look, outsized very fast. Against shorter competitors, his frame does help him hold his own, but next to taller, more massive guys like Andrew or Samson, he just gets overwhelmed. On top of that, he's never really nailed a full dry conditioned look. His glutes and hamstrings and back have never come in the same crisp detail that the very top Olympians bring, obviously except for Samson Dauda, likely because he does try to maintain that fullness to keep his, mass advantage. If Rafael could bring that razor-sharp condition while keeping the shape intact, he would be far more competitive, but as things stand, size and detail are what keep him from challenging the very top. Now we have Chang Long Shen. His biggest flaw, in my opinion, is the imbalance between his upper and lower body. His legs are definitely his standout feature, big, detailed, and some of the best I've seen recently, but that only makes the rest of his physique look weaker by comparison. His chest and arms are pretty decent, but don't really match the full sweep and power of his legs, and most importantly, his back is definitely on the weaker side. At the Olympia level, back development is critical for winning poses from behind, and without more density and width there, he is gonna struggle. Add in that his overall structure isn't especially aesthetic or imposing, and it is clear where that gap comes in. While he does bring good detail and fullness, the imbalance can leave him looking more like a, leg-dominant competitor rather than a complete bodybuilder, and that is what will hold him back the most. Although I haven't seen him compete at the Olympia level, nor have I really seen him compete against a top-level competitor with his current physique, so we will just have to wait and see. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Next is Derek Lunsford. His biggest flaw is uneven condition. Over the years, he has gotten better, but even when he is at his absolute best, certain areas like the chest, inner arms, and even shoulders can look a little bit soft or washed out compared to the rest of his physique. He has done a good job fixing his midsection and even, the side leg presentation, mostly through posing adjustments, but the contrast is much more noticeable when you look at his shredded back and glutes versus the smoother look up front. Another issue would definitely be the quads, which can lose a lot of that volume if he doesn't peak on the fuller side. This was clear at the 2024 Olympia and again at the 2025 Pittsburgh Pro, where they looked smaller than usual. Derek has one of the most complete physiques in the division right now. I don't know how much I have to stress that, but these inconsistencies in condition and fullness are still the main things that can hold him back and prevent him from showing up at his absolute best. Now we come to Nick Walker. I would say that his most glaring flaw, and I'm sure all of you guys can kind of expect this, would be his waist. It is wide, difficult to control, and his abs have definitely split more in recent years, which makes the midsection much, less pleasing. When he locks into a pose, the control definitely improves and it becomes less of an issue, but the width is still obvious and it affects his overall silhouette compared to competitors with much tighter cores. The other concern would definitely be his quads. They have gotten better with more size and better separation, but genetically they will never have the long insertions or dramatic sweep that some of his rivals display. At times they can still look flat and don't really match the level of freakiness that he has in the arms, chest, or back. Now, these two flaws are what stand out the most to me, because in nearly every other area, Nick is right at the top of the very best. His density, condition, and even the roundness in nearly every other muscle group is just amazing, I would say, and that's why he remains a serious threat for the Olympia title, despite the limitations and also despite what other people might say. Coming up is Rubiel Mosquera. The biggest criticism of his physique is probably his overall proportionality. His legs are the largest in the entire division. I'm sure nobody is trying to debate that, and his quads and calves are just freakishly massive. And while his upper body is also massive, it doesn't quite balance with his lower half. His arms in particular can look a bit stubby compared to the rest of his frame, which makes the disparity stand out even more. On top of that, his conditioning is inconsistent. His quads do not really show a lot of deep detail, likely because of how much muscle is packed onto them, and from behind he's not as sharp or separated as other top Olympia competitors. Another noticeable issue is his hernia, which is very prominent on stage and really does distract from his overall presentation. Put together, Rubiel brings insane mass, but the lack of balance, the inconsistent condition, and the hernia keep him from presenting as polished of a package as he really could. Next up is Martin Fitzwater. Muscularity-wise, he is one of the most complete bodybuilders in the division, with no glaring weaknesses, I would say. If you wanted to nitpick, his structure is not the widest, which can limit him in poses like the front lat spread, and the split down his abs in the ab and thigh is not the most, pleasing. But overall, he's balanced and very dense elsewhere. The real issue for Martin has been peaking right. When he nails his condition, he does look like he can really win the Mr. Olympia, but when he is, having a problem with his peak, it really does mess up his form. At the last two shows post-2024 Olympia, his look definitely slipped noticeably as the season went on, and he did not keep the same sharpness. That inconsistency when it comes to peaking is the only thing really holding him back from placing higher or even upsetting some heavy favorites. If he does get it right, he is extremely dangerous, but in my opinion, that is a big if. Now we have Andrew Jacked. From the front, he is one of the best looking competitors in the entire division with incredible aesthetics, flowing lines, and nearly perfect proportion. His structure is definitely amazing, even if his calves and forearms are on the stringier side. The problems, the true ones at least, really show up more from the side and rear. His taller, longer frame makes it a bit more difficult for him to pack on that same thickness and density as some shorter competitors do. From the side, he can look a bit flat in the side leg, though his posing has gotten better somewhat, but from behind, the weaknesses are much clearer. The hamstrings do not have the same size or detail to match the upper body, and his back, while decently wide, still lacks a lot of that depth and separation of the very best. Add in that his calves and, forearms are still a bit undersized, and it keeps his physique from really being as complete as it looks from the front. Next is Vitali Ugolnikov. His physique from the front is really freaky, huge proportions, round muscle bellies, and eye-catching balance, but his biggest flaw shows up from behind. In the rear double, for example, his arms and legs are so impressive that they do overshadow his back, which doesn't really have the same depth or detail to match. His rear lat spread does look a lot better, mainly because of his width, but overall his back is still the one area that doesn't really quite keep up with the rest of his physique. From the side, he could also be a little bit thicker in poses like the side chest, and his side tricep could use stronger execution to show off his structure better. Still, these are not massive flaws, and structurally and muscularity-wise, Vitali has one of the most complete and striking physiques in the entire lineup, but tightening up his back and side poses would really make him even more dangerous at his first Mr. Olympia. Now we have Sasan Hirati. His biggest limitation would be his structure, in my own opinion. He has a smaller frame that isn't the most imposing, and from the front he does not have wide clavicles or incredibly sweeping lats that some other competitors use to dominate poses. From behind, his back isn't especially wide either, which makes him look a little bit narrow compared to other top competitors. His limbs are also a bit on the shorter, stubbier side, though not dramatically so. On the positive side, Sasan is very complete and consistently comes in very conditioned and peaked perfectly, which makes him look very polished on stage. But at this level, structure obviously matters as much as muscle, and his narrower frame is always going to hold him back from standing out against the larger, wider physiques. Moving on, we have Hadi Choopan. His most obvious weakness would be his arm structure. His biceps and triceps do have shorter insertions, which makes his arms look a little bit stubbier compared to the long, full muscle bellies of someone like Samson Dauda, or, even Andrew Jacked, who doesn't really have full, long muscle bellies, but they are a lot freakier and better proportioned. Now, it's not a deal breaker, but it does stand out in certain poses. The bigger issue, though, for Hadi here would be condition from the back. Even at his best, his glutes and hamstrings, and even the back don't really show razor-sharp detail that he consistently displays from the front. In the back poses, that lack of separation is really noticeable against competitors who are more peeled. From the side, he also can lack a bit of that density in areas like the chest, arms, and legs. And, even though that's not really as much of a weakness compared to the other ones I've mentioned, it definitely is noticeable on stage. Overall, I would say that his stubbier arms and softer conditioning from behind are the flaws that hold back an otherwise dense and very complete physique, and I would love to see him bring really shredded conditioning from behind, and if he does that, I don't think the arms would be as much of an issue, and he might even win the back poses, who knows. Second to last is Brett Wilkin. His biggest flaw would be the lack of overall size and width compared to the top Olympia competitors. On stage, he usually comes in very conditioned, but in the process, he tends to lose weight and ends up looking a lot smaller than he needs to. Structurally, he does not have the widest frame, and he doesn't carry any particularly freaky muscle insertions that would help him stand out. While his physique is incredibly balanced and very polished, it doesn't have the sheer mass or width that makes an Olympia contender truly imposing. Who knows, maybe he will bring that fullness this year while still keeping that condition, but in my opinion, if he does not, Brett will struggle to hold his ground against the much larger physiques in the division. Finally, we have Urs Kalecinski. After moving up from classic physique, he already has made a splash by winning back-to-back shows and becoming the last man to qualify for the 2025 Olympia in the open division. But there are some clear issues. From the front, his intra-arm separation is not very impressive, so his biceps and triceps do not have that same dramatic detail as some other competitors like Nick Walker. His back is also a much bigger issue. It's narrow, lacks a lot of that thickness, and doesn't show the same condition or density as, the front or side. On top of that, one of his calves does look a bit atrophied, which has sparked speculation about possible nerve damage there, though he has also mentioned in the past a foot injury as the reason. Whatever the cause, the imbalance is definitely noticeable. Overall, Urs is very complete, and his recent size gains have made him much more competitive, but his back remains the biggest flaw, keeping him from being at the same level as the very top in the division. Anyways guys, that about does it for this video. Please let me know down below your thoughts and opinions, and remember, this isn't meant to be hate towards anyone. With that being said, I do hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.